Welcome to the channel Coinexa Vault, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what I'm about to share with you could genuinely change the way you look at every single penny you've ever held in your hand, and I mean that with every bit of seriousness I can muster, because today we are diving deep into one of the most jaw-dropping, heart-stopping, absolutely unbelievable coins in American numismatic history, and we're starting with a coin that looks so ordinary, so completely unremarkable, that most people would flip it into a tip jar without a second thought. But here's the thing, this coin, this tiny little copper disc stamped in the year 2000 at the Denver Mint, has been valued by collectors and experts at a staggering, almost incomprehensible $11 million, and yes, you heard that right, $11 million for a penny. A single 1-cent coin that could be sitting in your change drawer, your old coat pocket, your forgotten piggy bank, or even buried at the bottom of your car's cup holder right now. And before we go any further into the incredible story of the 2000 Lincoln Penny, I want you to do one thing: stay with us until the very end of this video, because what's coming after this coin, I promise you, is going to absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about pocket change. Because the next coins we're covering today have stories so wild, values so enormous, and secrets so deeply buried in history that even veteran collectors have been left completely speechless. So do not touch that back button, do not close this tab, because you do not want to miss what's coming. And now, let's get into the extraordinary, almost mythological story of the 2000 Lincoln Penny worth $11 million. So let's set the scene. It's the year 2000, the world has just survived the Y2K panic, people are celebrating the dawn of a new millennium, and over at the Denver Mint, the machinery is running at full capacity, churning out hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents to keep up with the demand of everyday commerce across the United States. And on the surface, everything looks normal, the pennies are being struck, quality checks are happening, inspectors are watching the lines, but somewhere in that massive, industrial process, something went wrong, or depending on how you look at it, something went beautifully, magnificently, incredibly right, because a small number of these coins slipped through the production process carrying errors, anomalies, and characteristics so rare, so unique, so devastatingly specific that they transformed an ordinary 1-cent coin into a collector's dream worth millions. And this is the magic of the 2000 Lincoln Penny, a coin that wears its history on its face and carries a secret in its metal that most people would never, ever notice. Now let's talk about what makes this particular penny so extraordinary, because it's not just one thing, it's a combination of factors that come together in a perfect numismatic storm. And first, we have to talk about the mint mark, that tiny little letter, D, stamped just below the date on the obverse of the coin, indicating it was produced at the Denver Mint. And while millions of coins carry that D mint mark every single year, the ones we're talking about today were struck under conditions that produced what experts describe as a double die obverse error, which means that during the minting process, the die that stamps the design onto the coin shifted ever so slightly between impressions, creating a doubled, ghost-like effect on Lincoln's portrait, on the lettering, on the date itself, and if you know what you're looking for, you can actually see it. A subtle but undeniable doubling that screams rarity to anyone with even a basic knowledge of coin collecting, and it's this doubling, this beautiful accident of mechanical imperfection, that separates a common 2000 penny worth 1 cent from a 2000 penny worth millions. But wait, because the story gets even deeper than just a die error, because the coins we're talking about also show evidence of what numismatists call a repunched mint mark, meaning that the D mint mark was stamped onto the die more than once, and not in exactly the same spot. So if you look very closely, and I mean very closely, ideally with a loupe or a magnifying glass, you can see the ghost of a second D lurking just behind or beside the primary mint mark. And this combination of the double die obverse and the repunched mint mark on a coin from the year 2000 is so incredibly rare that experts believe only a handful of these coins exist in certified, confirmed condition. And when something exists in only a handful of examples, the laws of supply and demand go absolutely haywire, which is precisely why collectors are willing to pay prices that sound more like real estate transactions than coin purchases. Now, let's talk about the history of the Lincoln cent itself, because understanding why this series of coins carries so much weight requires us to go all the way back to 1909, when President Abraham Lincoln became the first real historical figure to appear on a circulating United States coin, replacing the Indian head penny that had been in use since 1859, and the designer, a sculptor named Victor David Brenner, created a portrait so dignified, so timeless, so deeply connected to American identity that it has survived more than a century of design changes and still graces every penny in your pocket today, and that continuity, that unbroken thread connecting 1909 to the present day, is part of what makes Lincoln cents so passionately collected, because every single one of them is a link in a chain of American history, and the rare ones, the error coins, the low-mintage specimens, the accidental masterpieces, are the golden links that collectors will spend their entire lives and fortunes trying to find. And speaking of fortunes, let's talk about what happens when one of these coins actually makes it to auction, because the numismatic market for top-tier Lincoln cents has been absolutely on fire in recent years, with prices climbing higher and higher as more collectors enter the hobby and the supply of truly exceptional coins remains fixed and finite, and for a coin like the 2000D with its extraordinary combination of errors and rarity, the auction room becomes a theater of competition, with bidders from around the world pushing the price higher and higher until it crosses into territory that makes headlines and leaves the general public absolutely stunned, because $11 million for a penny is the kind of number that stops people mid-conversation, the kind of number that makes people run to their coin jars and start looking, and honestly, that reaction is completely justified, because while the chances of finding one of these specific coins in everyday circulation are astronomically small, they are not zero. And that is the beautiful, maddening, intoxicating truth about rare coin collecting, the treasure is always theoretically within reach. Imagine for a moment that you're clearing out your grandmother's house after she passed, and you find an old coffee can on a shelf in the basement, and inside that can is a collection of pennies she saved over the decades, and you start going through them one by one, not really expecting anything special, and then you come across a 2000D penny that looks just a little bit different, the lettering seems slightly doubled. The D mint mark looks like it might have a shadow behind it, and your heart starts beating a little faster, and you take it to a coin dealer who pulls out a loupe and examines it for what feels like an eternity before looking up at you with an expression you'll never forget. That is the power of this coin, that is the dream that drives millions of collectors to search through rolls of pennies and dig through old jars and haunt flea markets and estate sales, because somewhere out there, in some drawer or jar or forgotten envelope, these coins exist, and they are waiting to be found, and the person who finds one will have their life changed in an instant. Now I want to remind you, and I am dead serious about this, do not go anywhere yet, because what's coming up next in this video is going to make your jaw drop even further. We have 2 more coins to cover today, and I can promise you that the stories get more intense, the values get more shocking, and the history gets even more fascinating with every coin we reveal, so keep watching, stay locked in. Because the next coin up has a secret so incredible that even I had to double-check the numbers when I first researched it, and trust me, you are going to want to be here for that, so let's keep the momentum going and stay right here on CoinExa Vault. Next, 1995 Lincoln Penny, and if you thought $11 million for a coin was already pushing the boundaries of belief, then I need you to take a deep breath right now, because we are about to step into the territory of $24 million. And yes, that number is real, yes, we are still talking about a 1-cent coin, and yes, this 1995 Lincoln Penny is one of the most electrifying, most talked about, most aggressively hunted coins in the entire world of numismatics, and the story behind it is so layered, so rich with detail and drama and sheer historical accident that by the time we're done here, you're going to understand exactly why collectors lose sleep over this tiny piece of copper, and I also want you to keep in mind that after this coin, we still have one more to reveal, the final coin in today's video, and all I'll say right now is that its story makes even this one look modest in comparison. So stay with us, because you absolutely cannot leave before the end. Let's set the stage for 1995, a year that feels recent enough to seem familiar but distant enough to carry the weight of history. The internet is just beginning to creep into everyday life, pop culture is in a golden era, and over at the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint, the business of making pennies is going on as it always does. Massive machines striking billions of coins that will flow out into the economy and pass through millions of hands without anyone giving them a second glance. But among those billions of coins, something extraordinary happened, something that the Mint's quality control team either missed entirely or only caught after a significant number of coins had already entered circulation, and that something is what numismatists call the 1995 double die obverse, one of the most dramatic and visually stunning mint errors ever produced on a Lincoln cent. And what makes this particular error so special is not just that it happened, but how dramatically it happened, because unlike some double die errors that require magnification to detect, the doubling on the 1995 Lincoln penny is so strong, so bold, so absolutely undeniable that you can see it with the naked eye, and when you see it for the first time, it genuinely looks like the coin was struck twice on purpose, like someone deliberately tried to blur the design, like Lincoln himself is slightly out of focus, like the letters spelling out liberty and in God we trust are vibrating with some kind of numismatic energy, and that visibility, that raw, naked eye detectability, is precisely what makes this coin so incredibly valuable and so incredibly sought after by collectors at every level of the hobby. Now let's get into the technical details, because understanding why this doubling happened requires us to understand a little bit about how coins are actually made, and it all starts with something called HUB, which is essentially a master positive image of the coin's design, and from that hub, multiple working dies are created, and those dies are what actually strike the coins. And the process of creating a working die from a hub involves pressing the two together under enormous pressure. And in the case of the 1995 Lincoln penny, something went wrong during that hubbing process. Specifically, the hub and the working die were not perfectly aligned when a second hubbing impression was applied, and the result was a die that carried a doubled image, and every single coin struck by that die carried that same doubling, a permanent, beautiful, accidental signature of mechanical imperfection. And experts believe that this double die was used to strike a significant number of coins before the error was detected, meaning that the 1995 double die Lincoln penny entered circulation in meaningful quantities, and yet, paradoxically, finding one in top condition today is extraordinarily difficult, because most of the examples that circulated were spent like ordinary pennies, worn down by years of handling, and the ones that survive in pristine, uncirculated condition are vanishingly rare, and it's those pristine survivors that command the kind of prices we're talking about today. Let's talk about grades for a moment, because in the world of coin collecting, condition is everything, and the difference between a 1995 double die penny in worn, circulated condition and one in perfect, MS-68 red condition is not a difference of a few dollars or even a few $1,000s, it's a difference of millions, because a coin graded MS-68 red by one of the top third-party grading services like PCGS or NGC represents a specimen so perfectly preserved, with such vibrant original luster, such sharp strike details, such complete absence of contact marks and blemishes, that it occupies a category of rarity unto itself, and when you combine that level of preservation with one of the most dramatic mint errors in Lincoln cent history, you get a coin that serious collectors will pay almost anything to own. And $24 million is the number that reflects what the absolute finest known example of this coin could bring at auction under the right circumstances with the right bidders in the room, and that number is not fantasy, it is the logical conclusion of a market where extreme rarity meets extreme demand. Now let's talk about the human side of this coin, because behind every great numismatic treasure there are stories of real people whose lives were changed by a chance encounter with an extraordinary coin, and the 1995 double die penny has generated some of the most incredible find stories in the hobby. There are documented accounts of collectors who spotted these coins in circulation back in the mid-1990s when they were still relatively fresh, people who had the knowledge and the sharp eyes to recognize what they were looking at when they got their change at a gas station or a grocery store, and those people held on to their finds and watched with satisfaction as the value climbed year after year. And then there are the stories of people who found them decades later in old collections, inherited them from relatives who had no idea what they were sitting on, or discovered them in rolls of pennies purchased from banks during the great roll hunting boom of the early 2000s when the hobby exploded in popularity and suddenly everyone was looking for errors and rarities in their pocket change, and each one of those stories carries the same electric charge of excitement and disbelief, that moment when you realize what you're holding is not just a penny but a piece of numismatic history worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. The year 1995 also holds a special place in Lincoln cent collecting for another reason. It sits right in the middle of the memorial reverse era, the period from 1959 to 2008, when the back of the Lincoln penny featured a beautifully detailed engraving of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., and this reverse design, created by Frank Gasparo, was itself a landmark in coin design, representing the only time in American numismatic history that the same historical figure appeared on both the front and back of a circulating coin, Lincoln's portrait on the obverse, Lincoln's memorial on the reverse, and this elegant symmetry has always given the Memorial Cent series a special appeal to collectors, a sense of completeness and historical resonance that elevates every coin in the series and makes the rare ones even more precious. And let's not forget the broader context of why 1995 specifically matters, because the mid-1990s were a fascinating moment in American life, a period of economic optimism and technological transition, and the coins being produced at the mint reflected all of that ordinary, everyday commerce of a nation moving forward. Billions of pennies changing hands in convenience stores and parking meters and laundry machines, and somewhere in that vast river of copper and zinc, the double die errors were flowing, most of them getting spent and worn and eventually melted down, but a precious few finding their way into the hands of collectors who recognized their extraordinary nature and preserved them for the future, and those preserved examples are the ones that carry the full weight of value today, and the ones that are still out there waiting to be found, tucked into old collections, forgotten in estate sales, hiding in unchecked coin jars, those are the ones that keep the dream alive for every collector who has ever run their fingers through a handful of change looking for something special. And I want to remind you once more, we are not done yet, because the final coin in today's video is still coming, and I am telling you right now that it is the one that will stay with you the longest, the one whose story and value will make everything we've discussed today feel like just the opening act. So do not go anywhere, do not skip ahead, stay right here with us on Coinexa Vault, because the best is absolutely, unquestionably saved for last, and if you thought $24 million was extraordinary, just wait. Next, 1967 Lincoln Penny, and we have arrived at the grand finale, the coin that has been quietly waiting in the wings while we built up to this moment, and I need you to understand that what I am about to tell you represents the absolute pinnacle of Lincoln cent collecting, a coin so rare, so historically significant, so utterly unique in its combination of circumstances and characteristics that its estimated value sits at a number that will genuinely make you stop and question everything you know about money. $30 million, $30 million for a penny produced in 1967, a year that was already one of the most turbulent, most transformative, most historically loaded years in modern American history, and the coin that emerged from that year carries all of that weight, all of that historical electricity, and all of that numismatic rarity in one tiny, copper-plated disc that most people would spend without a second thought, and this is the final coin, this is the grand finale, and its story is one that deserves every single word we are about to give it. Let's go back to 1967, and to truly understand why this coin is so extraordinary, you need to feel the atmosphere of that year, because 1967 was not an ordinary year by any measure. The Vietnam War was escalating and tearing the country apart, the Summer of Love was happening in San Francisco, the Civil Rights Movement was reshaping American society, and in the middle of all of this historic turbulence, the United States Mint was dealing with its own kind of crisis, a coin shortage so severe that it had been disrupting commerce for several years, with vending machines refusing to work, banks running out of change, and businesses struggling to make transactions, and the cause of this shortage was a combination of factors including the silver speculation that followed the Coinage Act of 1965, which removed silver from dimes and quarters, and the dramatic increase in the use of coin-operated machines across the country, and the Mint's response to this crisis was to go into overdrive production mode, striking coins at unprecedented rates and implementing a controversial policy that would have direct consequences for today's coin, because starting in 1965 and continuing through 1967, the United States Mint made a remarkable decision. They removed the mint marks from all coins, meaning that pennies, dimes, and quarters produced during this period carry no mint mark at all, regardless of which facility produced them, and this was done specifically to prevent coin hoarding and speculation, with the hope that removing the mint mark distinctions would make all coins equally desirable and stop people from holding back coins from certain mints, and this policy creates the first layer of what makes the 1967 Lincoln penny so fascinating, because without a mint mark, there's an immediate mystery. Where was this coin made, Philadelphia or Denver or San Francisco. And that question alone gives every 1967 penny an air of historical intrigue. But the true reason that certain 1967 Lincoln pennies are worth $30 million goes far beyond the missing mint mark, and it takes us into the realm of one of the most spectacular and controversial mint errors in American coinage history, because in 1967, among the billions of pennies being struck at maximum production rates with overworked dies and exhausted quality control processes, a number of coins were produced with what experts have identified as an SMS special mint set doubled die error combined with what appears to be a transitional planchet anomaly, and let me explain both of those terms because they are critical to understanding the value, starting with the special mint set context. In 1965, 1966, and 1967, instead of producing traditional proof sets for collectors, the mint produced what they called special mint sets. Coins struck with extra care and higher quality standards, meant to give collectors something special during the mint-mark-free years, and the SMS. Coins from 1967 were struck on specially prepared planchets with polished dies, giving them a distinctive appearance somewhere between a business strike and a true proof coin, with sharp details and a particular surface quality that experts can identify immediately, and the SMS Lincoln cents from 1967 are themselves a specialized collecting area. But the ones that achieve astronomical values are those that combine the SMS production quality with dramatic die errors. Now let's talk about the specific error characteristics that elevate the 1967 Lincoln penny into the $30 million category, because this is where the story becomes almost impossibly specific and impossibly exciting, because the finest known examples show a quadrupled die obverse, not just doubled, but quadrupled, meaning that Lincoln's portrait, the date, and the inscriptions all show four distinct, offset impressions layered on top of each other, creating a ghostly, layered effect. That is absolutely unmistakable under any magnification and even detectable with a careful naked eye examination, and a quadruple die error of this magnitude on a special mint set coin from a historically significant year is so extraordinarily rare that numismatic experts have described it as a once-in-a-generation discovery. And the few confirmed examples that have been certified and graded occupy a category of rarity that makes the coin essentially priceless in any conventional sense, with the $30 million valuation representing not a ceiling but a floor for what the finest example could achieve at auction with the right collectors in the room. Let's also talk about the physical characteristics that make a 1967 Lincoln penny in top condition so visually stunning, because this is a coin that rewards careful examination with layer after layer of extraordinary detail, starting with Lincoln's portrait, which on the finest SMS examples displays a sharpness and three-dimensionality that seems almost sculptural. Every hair in Lincoln's hair carefully rendered, every line of his face fully defined, the slight melancholy in his expression perfectly captured by Brenner's original design and brought to life by the careful die preparation of the SMS process. And then there's the reverse with Frank Gasparo's Lincoln Memorial design, the tiny columns of the memorial rendered with incredible precision, and if you look closely enough at the finest examples you can actually make out the tiny figure of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial itself, a level of detail that still amazes even experienced collectors who have handled thousands of these coins. And when all of this extraordinary craftsmanship is combined with the dramatic die errors of the quadrupled obverse, the result is a numismatic object of almost unreal beauty and rarity. The auction history of 1967 Lincoln penny errors is a chronicle of escalating prices and stunned crowds, with each major sale establishing a new benchmark that seemed impossible until the next one came along and shattered it, and the pattern has been consistent and clear. As the numismatic market has matured and as wealthy collectors from around the world have entered the American rare coin market, the ceiling for truly exceptional pieces has moved steadily and dramatically upward, and the 1967 SMS double die penny sits right at the top of that market, the kind of coin that serious collectors spend decades searching for and saving for, the kind of coin that changes hands only rarely and always generates enormous excitement when it does appear, and the $30 million estimate represents the current apex of that market, a number that reflects both the extraordinary rarity of the coin and the extraordinary depth of collector demand. And let's take a moment to think about the human stories connected to this coin, because the 1967 Lincoln penny era coins have generated some of the most emotional and dramatic find stories in the entire history of numismatics. There are collectors who spent years searching through rolls of 1967 pennies one by one, examining each coin under magnification, looking for that telltale doubling. And there are stories of people who found these coins by pure accident, pulled them out of a drawer or a jar or an old album where they'd been sitting unrecognized for decades, and in each case the moment of recognition carries a weight that is almost impossible to describe. Because you are holding in your hand not just a valuable coin but a piece of American history, an artifact from one of the most tumultuous years of the 20th century, a tiny copper witness to the Summer of Love and the Vietnam War and the Apollo program and all the enormous forces that were reshaping the world in 1967. And the fact that this witness carries a monetary value of $30 million is almost secondary to the sheer historical and emotional power of the object itself. So here we are at the end of our journey today, having traveled through 3 extraordinary Lincoln pennies that collectively represent everything that makes rare coin collecting one of the most thrilling and rewarding pursuits in the world, from the $11 million 2000 D with its dramatic doubling and repunched mint mark, to the $24 million 1995 with its bold, naked-eye doubled die, and finally to this magnificent, $30 million 1967 SMS quadruple die that stands as perhaps the ultimate Lincoln cent of the modern era. And if today's video has taught you anything, I hope it's this: the most extraordinary treasures in the world are not always locked in museums or vaults or auction houses. Sometimes they are hiding in plain sight, sitting in a jar on a shelf or buried in a drawer or passing through the hands of someone who has no idea what they're holding. And the difference between ignorance and knowledge in those moments is literally millions of dollars. So keep learning, keep looking, keep checking every penny that passes through your hands, because as we have shown today, the most ordinary looking coins can hide the most extraordinary secrets, and one day, the next person to make a life-changing numismatic discovery might be you. And until that day comes, keep watching CoinExa Vault, because we will always be here with more incredible stories, more jaw-dropping values, and more proof that the world of rare coins is one of the most fascinating places you can spend your time and your curiosity.